Hello,
Okay,
everybody.
beautiful.
Thank you, Russ. So as you know,
Yes, Fractal University.
yes, I'm Dan Winter, fractalfield.com, fractalu.com, and I'm here with Russell Wright. Uh, Russell is our hero from the Discord group with Fractal U. Russell is also quite an amazing person. He's you might say a plasma projector. He does well, remote viewing and all kinds of other things, out of body projects, very conscious of that, quite a shaman from Odessa and around the world. Amazing, amazing person. So thank you, Russell, for suggesting.
Yes, yes, Dan. I actually thought about a nice intro for this, and with the Fractal University, I want everybody to know that, with Fractal U, we have the founder, the creator, the principal, the dean, and the headmaster, Dan Winter. And this is the information that today we'll be talking about: the rebuttals to Terrence Howard's work. And let's get right into it. How are
Good.
you, Dan?
Yes, that's the point. So, Terrence Howard's interview with Joe Rogan had like 10 million views in, I don't know, a week or two, which means the level of interest is fabulous. And that interest is a good thing. Sadly, the physics is so bad in some places that serious scientists really can't help but throwing up. I mean, it's very upsetting, actually. On the other hand, I want to emphasize here how much I admire Terrence Howard, for example, for his ability to remember what it felt like to incarnate in his mother's body in some detail, and he intuits vortex theory, and he's thought personally and creatively himself about the geometry in the atomic table. So we're not here to put down this person. No, we're here to admire, actually. The problem is that, if 10 million young people watch this in the first week or two, the intuitions are moving in a useful direction, but there's some places which absolutely make nauseous every scientist in the neighborhood, and unfortunately will confuse a large number of people. And we want to do some preliminary sorting. For example, when any New Age woo-woo says they're going to teach you the difference between electricity and magnetism, prepare to be nauseated. Actually, it's unfortunate. And this means that these people have no background in science. In fact, unfortunately, Terrence's primary moderators seem to be numerologists, and this is not good news. But let's do a for example on that. Electricity and magnetism are names for the same charge flux motion. It's just that on the surface of a torus, which is essentially the geometry of every electromagnetic field, if you measure the component of that charge moving in a donut, the component of that charge moving in this perpendicular direction, you can think of as magnetic, versus the component of that charge moving perpendicularly to that, you can think of as electric. So the way you measure the approaching donut electromagnetic field determines whether you're measuring the voltage, which is simply a name for the change in pressure, and he mentions pressure.
Mhm.
That's good. Versus the magnetic, which is the flux moving perpendicularly. So electricity and magnetism are exactly the same stuff. They're simply moving perpendicularly on a torus. And the way you measure them changes whether you want to measure the inertia this way or this way. But that doesn't mean they're separate stuff. And this, unfortunately, leads to a profound kind of schizophrenia when these new age woo-woos are trying to tell you the difference between electricity and magnetism. And this is an example of why scientists in the room are like tossing their cookies, we might say, like 1 × 1 = 2. So, but our purpose is not to go through and pick on this poor guy. Actually, he's extremely creative. He's extremely articulate. His memory is amazing of his birth and other things. And he's able, and he's creative. This is a good thing. So what I would like to do is suggest where some of his intuitions actually move in a profound and useful direction, and explain what about that was useful. What do you think? Is that good, Russ? should we pick on the poor?
Yeah. No, it's perfect. It's perfect. We got it in a balanced state.
Yeah.
Don't want to put anybody down.
No,
So
no,
yeah, the
that's not a,
mathematics is off a little bit.
yeah.
What's off about it?
Yeah. So, but what we want to say is where this could move in a useful direction. And for that, I have actually worked extensively on a website which does address this issue, which is related to an existing website I've been working for years, goldenmean.info/creation. Can you see my screen okay, Russ?
Yes, yes, yes.
Great.
Perfect.
Okay. So Terrence Howard's fundamental insight basically was that, oh, he looked at Walter Russell and he saw the entire atomic table evolve from one simple standing sine wave. And this is that picture. And that is a useful insight. And from that, Terrence and Walter Russell claim to have predicted other atoms that were discovered later in history, which is, it's colorful. That is interesting. But the point here is what I want to say should be the pure principle. Terrence Howard actually does mention conjugation. Wonderful, actually, because that's exactly what's happening at the top of this chart. That sine wave, the correct term for this sine wave is called recursive heterodyning, which produces a caduceus. And the ratios of the wavelength on that predict the radii of the atomic table. The numbers of the number of hadrons in the nucleus is literally the atomic number, 1, 2, 4. And he relates that oversimplistically to simple frequencies and octaves, which is painfully simplistic. And scientists in the room are having a cow because, this is for 4-year-olds, and let's not confuse our kids. However, this is the point. There is a profound and useful insight here. And here it is in a nutshell. What Terrence Howard is obviously yearning for, but never, ever, ever gets there, is that implosive charge collapse creates all centripetal force. Once you know what the origin of any centripetal force, like consciousness, life force, gravity, and negentropy, then you can know what bends the wave from a line to a circle. Literally, the origin of all curvature, as like we say here, only love / implosive embedding bends the light, therefore only only love bends the light, therefore only love creates. That's a powerful Sufi saying, and it's correct. Love, long wave phi ratio, implosive embedding. Here, when you take a sine wave and recursively interfere it with itself, the only recursive cascade of interference called constructive recursive heterodyning is when waves interfere with themselves, they either make golden ratio or they die. So this interference pattern is pointing to the fact that recursive heterodyning ultimately makes golden mean ratio, which is the perfection of heterodyning and wave interference, which is how you make a nest of platonic solids, which is how you create implosion at all centripetal forces. So that's obviously what he's yearning to discover, but unable to articulate. And that's what I've placed here at goldenmean.info/creation. So Walter Russell's atomic table, as in Terrence Howard, did have one key insight, deriving the geometry of atomic nesting from perfect recursive heterodyning. Recursive heterodynings only achieve constructive interference when the wavelengths are golden ratio, namely perfect fractal conjugation. And that creates successful charge collapse, named PlanckFire.com, and is exactly what perfects platonic solid nesting. His whole thing is to visualize platonic solid nesting, but he doesn't understand why that's useful. So again, this is the article, goldenmean.info/creation. And that platonic solid nesting is actually the real origin of all centripetal attractive forces, gravity, life force, consciousness, and negentropy, which is the only thing which moves charge in a straight line to potentially perfect implosive curvature, quality of grace, initiating the spiral, which is how you bend the light, which is what golden mean ratio does. So the next slide here is a correct, in physics, absolute model of the atomic table based on precisely this geometry of the platonic nest. Now, Terrence Howard says incorrectly that you can't incorporate all platonic solids in one nest. He's wrong. Here they are, goldenmean.info/kit, the star mother. Tetra octa cube center embedded in dodeca ecosa dodeca, the only possible 3D fractal. And as we see here, that is literally precisely the actual electric geometry of the way the electron shells nest Here, the s orbital is toroidal, the pi suborbital is tetracubic, and the df suborbitals are dodecaecosa. And further, here we look at Moon's work on the Platonic geometry of the nucleus, and we see exactly the hadrons of the nucleus, protons and neutrons, exactly their geometry. Chemist, Moon, University of Chicago. The geometry of the nucleus, modeled here, is literally a Platonic nest, because that creates charge collapse, because that creates golden ratio, and that is what holds atoms together. So the tetracube octaecosa geometry of all the hadrons of the nucleus are modeled accurately by chemist Moon, University of Chicago. So the atomic table is a dodeca nest. And now we know the reason why, because that's the way gravity is made. So in fact, the wave at the top here is the wavelength of hydrogen, which I proved is golden ratio to the electron shells of hydrogen. You heterodyne the golden ratio electron shells of hydrogen from my new equation to Planckfire.com, and you do in fact get the Platonic nest and implosion, the cause of charge collapse. So Terrence Howard then shows his model of the way soap bubbles nest. And again, it's obvious he is yearning to understand how you create a centripetal force from the geometry of bubbles nesting. But I'm sorry to say, does not have a clue. The physics is that tetracubic geometries of soap bubbles here, which is cube octa here, you take the tetracube octa, here's the cube octa, and here's the icosa, and here's the tetra. So in the center, the tetracubic, tetraoctacube symmetries, hex shadow, is all octave ratio, creates maximum destructive wave interference, perfect, as in the hex snowflake, for creating stability, like the snowflake is hex because it literally cannot collapse. It can't. So tetracubic structures, this is Bucky Fuller over again, cannot implode. However, that's 7 axes of spin symmetry. Whereas the outer structures, the dodecaecosa in that nest, they create pent golden ratio and they invite collapse. So actually, even Nassim was right to model, as Bucky Fuller intuited but did not say, that the jitterbug is literally the only physics of implosive perfected charge collapse. Cube octa, ecosa, octa, there's a dodeca in there, and here's the tetra. So this is a model of charge collapse. Even Nassim got that right. Now, if you take the 12 spheres around one, you get a cube octa. This is called the Christed one. And again, Terrence is getting close to this when he models where there's a gap between the nested spheres in octa and cube. But actually, the 12 spheres around one create a crystal structure which is cubic and octahedral and cannot collapse. However, if you do initiate the collapse, where the 12th sphere merges, the 13th sphere merges into the other 12, called the Christed one, it literally melts into the other 12. Then the soap bubbles suddenly create the dodecaecosa, which is collapse, crystallization, implosion. So this, again, the whole jitterbug story is the origin of charge collapse. So, Terrence is showing us the gaps between the soap bubbles nest, and he's showing us only the gaps between soap bubbles in a tetracube octa, which will absolutely never be centripetal implosive, and therefore never be unifying and never be attractive, actually. So until he graduates to nesting those spheres in dodecaecosa, at one point he shows that he can take his little octahedrons and arrange them in a dodeca, but he does not intuit how you create golden ratio implosion, and therefore all centripetal negentropic forces, although obviously he's yearning in that direction. And just finally, we show that in the dodeca arrangement of soap bubbles here, you can actually do non-destructive charge collapse. That is changing scale without changing ratio, and that soap bubble really sucks. And here's the dodecaecosa. So we're carrying on. Have we picked on the poor guy? What do you think?
I think we're right there. We're right there. I think he'll listen to this and maybe get a few ideas.
Yeah, and just in closing about wonderful but poor Terrence, he has a useful intuition when he says that DNA will tighten.
Hmm.
in the presence of correct frequencies. Actually, that is a useful intuition. But we have developed the physics on that exquisitely and extensively, which actually that when the power spectra of the EKG, the human bliss, caused
Hmm.
a recursive braid implosion by the phonon wave in DNA, yes, the DNA tightens. It literally implodes into a torus. goldenmean.info/DNA manifesto. And when he intuits that frequencies can heal, he's moving in a useful direction. But we have a whole lifetime of work describing precisely and exactly Planckfire.com, the frequencies, Planck times integer exponents of golden ratio called fractality, conjugation perfected, creates all centripetal forces and all negentropy. And those are the frequencies exactly of the Schumann cascade, the brainwave cascade, the DNA braiding, frequencies we use at therify.net for healing globally, and the frequencies we're now using in piezofire.com. It's called fractalfield.com/implosion sound. So we have a lifetime of work on very accurately modeling in biophysics which frequencies can implode, become negentropic, and centripetal. And so as we see 10 million people watch Terrence Howard try to speak to 4-year-olds, oh,
Hmm.
and intuition's not bad, but there's so much crap in there. I don't want to pick on the poor guy, but oh my God. So just to do a little bit of a try here to suggest we think it's wonderful so many people are interested, but how about using some real solid hard science? Look, no serious physicist has ever questioned my equation for the origin of hydrogen. It's indisputable. Planck times golden ratio equals hydrogen radii to many accurate precision digits. And now we have 200 profound physical variables also accurately predicted by Planck times integer exponent golden ratio, which is
Hmm.
planckfire.com. No scientist has ever said we were wrong, ever, because they all agree charge collapse causes consciousness and gravity. And now we see all negentropy. So these are problems we've looked at in detail, and it's a little bit disturbing seeing the woo-woos, 10 million
Hmm.
of them, looking
Hmm.
at some useful intuitions, but also profound confusion. Okay,
Hmm.
so I carried on. That's my 2 cents. What do you think, Russ?
So here's what's popping into my mind. So Neil deGrasse Tyson with Star Talk, world-renowned scientist right now, at the leading edge of science. He basically had a rebuttal for Terrence, and I want to know, for layman's terms, how to actually concentrate this. And the mathematics is what he's trying to change. Terrence Howard is trying to instill a new form of mathematics. What is it about the mathematics that he has right now that is not translating to the work you've done and the formulas you have created?
Well, you know, Terrence Howard's profound confusion is 1 times 1 equals 2. Excuse me, but every scientist in the neighborhood is tossing their cookies, including Neil deGrasse. But let me say another thing here. What Terrence Howard is obviously yearning to get toward is the
Mm-hmm.
mathematics and the wave geometry, which causes gravity and all centripetal forces. He even says he's trying to understand the cause of gravity. Of course, not only does Terrence Howard not have a clue why any object falls to the ground, but neither does Neil Tyson. Absolutely does
Right.
not have the first clue of why any object falls to the ground. So both of these guys need to be looked at extremely dubious. I don't want to pick on them, but I must want to say, if you can't tell why an object falls to the ground, you are not going to know why anything is centripetal, including consciousness, life force, all negentropy, and gravity. They're all centripetal. And if you don't know why anything is centripetal, you should not pretend to be in the conversation.
So do they have the wrong formulas? Are
Yes,
they?
yes, they need Planckfire.com. They need Planck times integer exponents of golden ratio, which
Mhm.
predicts charge collapse and therefore gravity. It's a very simple equation. It's powerful, and it's exactly what both of them are missing.
So their interface is off from the get-go, from the base. They don't have the correct formulas to.
No, no.
They're
The
not
answer,
starting from the right positioning.
Planck, the musical key signature of the universe times golden ratio integer exponents, is fractality perfected, is conjugation perfected, is charge collapse perfected, is the cause of all centripetal force, is the cause of gravity, consciousness, and life force. It's simple and clear, and these guys are clueless. Sorry, I don't mean to brag here. This is not about ego. This is about pure principle.
Right. Don't get an emotion into it. It's pure
No.
business.
Am I emotional? Yes.
No.
Am I invested? Oh, well.
Yeah.
Good point.
So okay, so one of the things that Terrence Howard said, and I kind of thought about it. He said a phrase where he said, "If you have 0 times 5, 0 times 9, where in life do you see that 0 times something gives you 0? If there is already a weight that you're timesing it. Why? So because I see this in terms of just the disorientation of indoctrination that's happening with a lot of kids right now, with a lot of things from just disorienting them. So when they look at their surroundings, they think, oh, is this a 0 or is this something I can, or a hero, or can I work with it? They look at trees and they don't see the connection, because I feel like we're teaching them the wrong numbers, or not the values are wrong. They look at a tree and they think, I don't need this, it's a 0, so they times it right there. They look at somebody, a bee flying by, they don't take the actual knowledge. For example, in business, I really took something from a spider. A spider builds its web, a perfect geometry, and it waits for something to come in, and then it feeds. Meaning that in business, that's the same exact the thought process is,
Well,
you don't have to chase the money. You don't have to chase the goal. You build a perfect geometry, concentrate on yourself, so within, so without, and it'll come to you. So
you implode and become the fractal attractor. Very nice. And what makes the attractor fractal at the center of the perfect spider's nest, which is Planck times gold ratio, by the way, which is the perfect spider nest and the perfect fractal, actually, there is no 0. No, the length that it compresses to is not 0. Absolutely not. The length it compresses to is precisely Planck, which is the wavelength at which the transverse EMF is converted to longitudinal EMF, called gravity waves, establishing embedding into the array, which is also the physics of the collective unconscious and clairvoyance, etc. So embedding into that longitudinal array by imploding through Planck, there is no 0. Actually, the concept of 0 in mathematics is absolutely crystal clear. And if you take 0 in mathematics, there's 0 in that power times 1. So 0 times 1 absolutely equals 0. It's a very clear and simple math. And Terrence, by trying to confuse that simple fact, is actually reflecting on the confusion of his thought process when he was very young and could not understand what 0 means, actually. So from a mathematic perspective, this is an unhelpful confusion being introduced to our young people. They need to understand what a 0 point is, and a 0 point is absolutely the dimension of Planck. And then we can start to think about what 0 point energy is, which is precisely and only and always implosion exactly to Planck, the cause and motor of all 0 point quote unquote free energy devices is precisely implosion to Planck. So 0 point is a good point.
You know, the first image you showed, it was like a river or a riverbank, and that's, I kind of thought about how there's the game of ladder of lights. So you go up and down, and one of the phrases in there was that love creates all. So I always explain love being, you know, a form of hate and appreciation and a negativity, positivity. It can always be, it's never ending, it's endless. So I always, so when I was looking at that, that's what it reminded me of. And it reminded me of a river bank, and that's probably the same geometry the banks are using to get to the still point.
Well, the perfect riverbank meander, the perfect meander in Schwenk sensitive chaos is ultimately a caduceus, which is perfect conjugation. So that is the perfect meander for the perfect riverbank. And you're very right to meditate on that about the nature of love, because love actually means long wave phi ratio perfect embedding. For example, if you actually love a tornado, you embed your plasma in it, you implode, you become its centripetal force, and you absolutely can steer tornadoes. We described goldenmean.info/dowsing. However, if you got yourself one damn awful metal, aluminum, steel buildings, please do not try to fall in love with it, because if you try to embed yourself into something which is not charge distribution enabled,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So once you understand the actual physics of what love is, you have to choose embeddability, which there are
Mhm.
some structures into which your aura can embed and become centripetal. So the physics here is that you gain energy during charge collapse only. So
Mhm.
only fall in love with things which enable charge collapse, trees, nature, high dielectric, living.
Exactly.
But stuff that is the opposite of charge collapse, modern metal cities with electrosmog, don't
Mhm.
fall in love there because you're going to lose inertia during the disabled charge collapse.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, so I
Um,
guess that's our happily ever after on this segment. Is that right? Or what do you?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think that's perfect. I think we got the point across. So
Yeah, you remember, we're not picking on Terrence Howard here. We think he's creative, has wonderful memory, imagination, he's articulate, and that kind of creativity is being admired. However, people who have zero background on electrical engineering or physics or anything, and mostly numerologists, do not let them teach your kids because they are confused. Just one last example. He says a straight line is evil. Well, a straight line and a right angle was evil in Feng Shui only because in that angle, charge cannot collapse, implode. So the physics, I've been teaching physics of Feng Shui for 30 years. The physics of Feng Shui saying a right angle is evil is simple. This is an angle at which charge implosion is not possible. However, curvature can enable implosion. So again, the physics of implosion is the reason that a line could be quote unquote evil. It's only about enabling the quality of grace, which enables a curvature which can implode. Only love
mhm.
creates, only love bends the light. That's the end of this happily ever after. Okay,
Love Fractal University, fractalfield.com.
to be
Damn,
shared.
beautiful.
We're going to become a shareable wave.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I'm going to end here. Thank you.